Welcome everybody to the CrySP speaker series on privacy. It is our great pleasure to have Alison Macrina from the Library Freedom Project. Alison has been doing great things and promoting freedom and was rated as one of the heroes who saved the internet in 2015. Yay! Thank you for saving the internet, Alison.
You're welcome. Thanks. Yeah, welcome.
And so she's part of the Library Freedom Project, and there's stickers up here if you like stickers. They look like these in the background. So you can come get some stickers after if you like. And Alison will be talking to us about saving the internet and other amazing things. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. So as Ian said, I am the director of Library Freedom Project. Our mission is to make real the promise of intellectual freedom in libraries. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happens when you bring privacy education, privacy enhancing technologies, privacy rights and information about the law into local communities via a space that I hope we all know and love, which is the library. So here's a recent photo of me at work. I am standing in front of the Lebanon Public Library in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and this is what I understand to be either the first ever or one of the first pro-Tor protests that has ever happened on the planet. So who here, by show of hands, knows what Tor is? Excellent. I was sort of wondering where maybe the library people were in the room. Not that library people don't know about Tor, but I imagine that the CrySP folks probably already know what's going on. That's fine. So Tor is privacy enhancing technology. It is free software that runs on an open network. And basically what you need to know about Tor is that it can help you protect some of your privacy online. So we wound up on this picket line promoting Tor and demanding its use in this local community because of the intervention of a US intelligence agency. What happened was that one of the projects we started at Library Freedom Project was trying to bring Tor into libraries, not just using the Tor software via something called Tor Browser, but running some of the essential infrastructure that makes Tor work. These are called Tor relays. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about why they fit into libraries. But this is a picture of me, as you can see, my giant face on this screen, and my colleague Nima Fatemi, who works with me at Library Freedom Project and also works on Tor Project. And we set up a pilot at this library in Lebanon over the summer. It was a really exciting day. We got to promote a lot of the great things that the library is already doing. For example, this library in Lebanon runs GNU Linux on all of its public computers and on its staff computers. New Hampshire is a really great place in the US. People might know that the state motto of New Hampshire is live free or die. So we thought it was a really opportune place to start a project about freedom enhancing, privacy enhancing software. And we got a fair amount of attention for this. This was just our pilot project to bring this technology into libraries. And as you can see, this is from Ars Technica, pretty big technology blog. And it was in a few other places. So really great attention for the community. We were really excited about getting this project going. The unfortunate thing was that the attention that we got went beyond just the local community and reached the Department of Homeland Security. Now, DHS, you guys are lucky that you don't have one of those here, is a Bush-era intelligence agency that was, I went from living in a country to living in a homeland. That was an interesting switch. DHS basically is an entity that does counterterrorism, and they are trying to sort of protect the children, and no one really knows exactly what they do because they don't do any of it very well. What they sometimes do is try to interfere in the autonomy of local libraries by sending emails to their local police like this. So you can see there's a link to that Ars Technica article that I just mentioned, and Special Agent Gregory D. Squire of DHS said, "Just terrific, that kid," that's me, "seems to be thinking just an inch past the end of her nose." So DHS was a little upset about us promoting Tor in this library and trying to use the library as a space to bring this privacy-enhancing technology into the community. So we got this, we found out that this happened. The library was understandably shaken by this, and they suspended the operation of the relay because honestly, who can blame them? If you got a letter from DHS who then contacted your local police and said, this is a really bad thing, you need to shut this down, and your only understanding of it was what Library Freedom Project had told you, maybe you would decide not to participate either. So we didn't want to leave it at that, though, because this is a really important project, and we knew that if we pushed back against it, we would probably have some success. So what we did was we wrote a letter to the library community. It says, Dear Kilton Library, because that's the particular branch of Lebanon libraries that was hosting the relay. And we wrote this letter and we said, we would love it if you would continue participation in this project. We named a number of the reasons why privacy and intellectual freedom and democracy are essential in our communities. And we got it signed by a whole broad coalition of public interest groups, including the Free Software Foundation, the Freedom of the Press Foundation, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, other foundations, a number of libraries, and library professional groups. We got some support from the Office of Intellectual Freedom. So a huge outpouring of locals and global support and library people and crypto people. And we also got the Electronic Frontier Foundation to set up a petition for us that we got 5,000 signatures in just a few days. It was over Labor Day weekend, actually, so no one was even around. And somehow, this made it into people's inboxes. And we sent this to the library, and then things kind of exploded. The story got picked up in a bunch of different news publications. These are just a few of the headlines. And it went all over the place. The library got about 80-something emails over the course of the few days. Only 2 of them were opposed to the project. And they got flooded with phone calls and visits, people who said, this is a super important thing for you to be doing, and we're so proud of our library for participating in this. And people saw how meaningful this was, that their library was not only joining this project, but was one of the first ones ever. Certainly the first US library, certainly the first US public library to support the Tor project. So that is where we get to this picture. So what happened was the library was having a board meeting a few days after we found out about the DHS thing. It went out in the media in ProPublica, and then there was just a couple of days before this board meeting. Now you might imagine what a board meeting in rural New Hampshire is like typically. Lebanon, New Hampshire is mostly pretty rural. Lebanon is a very small town, and their board meetings are usually just board members. Well, Nima and I showed up at the library, and we were greeted by a protest. The look on my face is pretty priceless. It's not just that I was so excited to be there and see all these amazing people supporting Tor and supporting privacy and freedom and all these wonderful ideals. But in particular, someone, right when this photo was being taken, someone said, Allison, look over there. And there was a tiny 4-year-old child holding a sign that said, down with Big Brother. And I was like, I lost it. So we went into the library and we were greeted by about 4 dozen people from the local community who had packed this tiny little library meeting room. And then the board met, and also media. And one of the most remarkable things was that everybody who came to the meeting was a local. We'd gotten this incredible global support. This EFF petition went everywhere. We got all this great media attention. But what really mattered to us was that the people who lived in Lebanon could have this thing belong to them and make a decision about what was best for their community together. So we go in, and it's flooded with people, and the board opens it up immediately to public comment. And one after another, people shared their stories of why they thought that this was relevant. One person said, I'm a Lebanon resident, but I grew up in Colombia. And I wish that something like Tor had existed during my country's civil war, because I know what it's like when the state enacts violence against political dissidents. And if something like Tor had existed when I lived in Colombia, people that I cared about would still be alive today. Another person got up, the mother of the child with the Big Brother sign, holding her kid, and she said, the thought that there are people on the internet who want to do harm to my child, that is a horrifying thought to me. But what is much more horrifying is that my child is going to grow up with only the remembrance of democracy. That for her, the world that I want her to inherit is one where her safety does not come at the compromise of other people's freedom. It was amazing. There was very few dry eyes in the house at this point. And so the board heard comments from the public, and then then it was their turn to speak, and they said, well, actually, we've voted unanimously on this before. This whole DHS kerfluffle sort of galvanized us even more into it. We learned more about Tor, we learned more about privacy-enhancing tools, and we're actually more interested in pursuing this project than ever. So in a way, it was sort of anticlimactic, right? Because there was no tension. At some point, we heard so many positive voices that I was like, get somebody, please. Even the local police who showed up they saw what the effect was on the people that they serve, and they said, well, you guys are right. I mean, we're here in the service of this community, and we're not going to go against them. DHS didn't show up at all. So the relay was turned back on that day, and since then, the story has become something I think that is, to me, talks about a public referendum that's happening around privacy. So this is us. This is me and Nima and Devin from the ACLU of New Hampshire, and also Chuck, who is the librarian there, after our victory. We then started hearing from a lot of other supporters, namely a guy that you might have heard of named Edward Snowden, who tweeted about it. Another thing that happened was that the New Hampshire library got a huge amount of attention. They brought their relay back up. And then their community started to demand more privacy trainings and more things sort of focused on this realm. So one thing that they did about 2 weeks later was they decided to screen the film Citizen4. Who here has seen Citizen4? If you haven't seen it, it's awesome. I mean, even if you feel like you know the whole Snowden story, like, it's still a really great movie. So a couple cool things that happened from there. Citizen4, they promoted it, and local libraries have movie screenings all the time. This is not anything new. One kind of cool thing that they decided to do as part of it was to make Tails drives for people who came to the screening. Who here knows what Tails is? Just a few people. Okay, so Tails is an operating system. It stands for the Amnesiac Incognito Live System. And you can run it on a flash drive, and it routes all of its traffic over Tor. It's basically a way to have a much more private operating system that you can just pop into your computer and use on the go. Now, for the cryptography and privacy people who are like, how could you give a Tails drive to a member of the public? Don't worry, they wrote only for testing purposes on the side of the drive, so it was totally okay. But what's remarkable about it is what happened next. So they decided to screen this film, Citizen4, and they made these drives. And again, we're talking about rural New Hampshire. How many people really come to their movie screenings in rural New Hampshire? Maybe usually 10. But they'd seen that there was a lot of interest around this. This big thing that happened with DHS was so huge that they thought, well, maybe this means that we've got a lot of community interest. Let's imagine that maybe 30 people are going to show up. So we'll make 30 maximum 30 people will show up. We'll make 30 Tails drives, and surely not everyone is going to want one anyway. 150 people came to the movie screening. They had to make Tails IOUs and fill them in later for folks who came back. The next thing that happened from this was that so in libraries, in order to screen a film, you have to get a movie license. And there are maybe, in the US, I think 2 big movie licensing companies that libraries call up and say, hey, we want to screen this film. Will you give us the license for $100 or whatever it is? So I was visiting a few other libraries right after this happened, and at one of them in Rhode Island, not too far from New Hampshire, a librarian came up to me and said, I have to tell you this great story. we saw everything that happened in New Hampshire, and we were so excited about it, and our community was really excited. And we decided that we wanted to also show Citizen4 because of the level of interest. So we called up the movie licensing place, one of two, and we get the movie licensor person on the phone. Her name is Sue. It's a small company. And we say, hey, we'd like a license for Citizen4. And Sue on the phone goes, another one of you? My God, I've been fielding calls from libraries all over the country who continue to want to show this movie. And so, you know, just a little glimpse of the kind of effect that this had across different states, and the way that community members react to it is pretty amazing. Another thing is that a US Congressperson, Zoe Lofgren, wrote a letter to the head of Department of Homeland Security and said, I'm appalled by what your organization has done here, and this is not, this is not the way that an intelligence agency is supposed to operate. I mean, we know they do a lot of things that they're supposed to do, but it's pretty remarkable when a congressperson is willing to push back against this. And you might know about Zoe Lofgren. She's pretty famous in the anti-surveillance world for an initiative, a law that it's still not passed yet, but that she brought forward called Aaron's Law. And Aaron's Law is, of course, an attempt to reform the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is one of the things that was used against Aaron Swartz before he died. So it has had not only an amazing community effect, but one that has had political consequence. And so we're still waiting to see what the effect of this letter will be. So I wanted to tell you guys the DHS story because that's like kind of the biggest thing that's happened to us lately. And I wanted to sort of start off with this explosion, but you might be wondering just exactly how I got here and what my organization is doing, how we ended up in this library running a Tor relay. So Library Freedom Project, we got started about 2 years ago. I was inspired by Snowden's revelations, and I was working as a librarian in a town in Massachusetts, not too far from where I live. I live in Boston. And I read everything that Snowden revealed, and I thought, this is everything that we were worried about with regard to the USA PATRIOT Act, among other things. This has all become real and much worse than we ever thought. So I decided that maybe I could teach some computer privacy classes in my local library, in the one where I was working, and see if there was any interest from my community, if they were feeling the same way that I was. And I had been interested in free software for a while, just on a personal level, and privacy tools had some appeal to me as part of the sort of free software ethos that I cared about freedom, and so fighting surveillance for my own self was important. So I started teaching these computer privacy classes, and they got to be really popular. And then I decided that I should try to teach other librarians to do the very same thing that I had been doing. So I got involved with my local ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. You might know them for 100 years of defending the rights of the constitutional rights of Americans and attempting to rein in our out-of-control government as much as possible. You also might know them more recently from representing Snowden. The ACLU National Office, the Technology, Privacy, and Something Project are his attorneys, Ben Wisner et al. So these are some great folks from the ACLU of Massachusetts. And what we put together was a program where we would teach other librarians not just about privacy-enhancing technologies like Tor, but also about their right to privacy under the law, their responsibilities as people who are stewards of information, who bring information and technology to the public, and also as people who have had dealings with the intelligence agencies in the US and their overreaching push for information. I'm going to get to that in a minute. So we decided to create these workshops for other librarians, this sort of train the trainer thing. So the next thing I did was I reached out to my friends at the Tor Project, and I said, we're teaching these trainings, I would love to have your input on this. So we had the legal and policy side of things and also the technologists. And what we put together was I think, a really holistic training that sort of covered all sides of it. So that got to be really super popular. In the interim from when I got started, I was able to secure some pretty significant grant funding, which is awesome. And in the last year, I've trained 2,500 librarians in more than 20 states and 4 countries. I have visited about 50 of those libraries. I have taught community-focused classes as well. This is a picture of me and Nima from Tor Project teaching a library training. So among the things that we teach to librarians, including things like Tor, we teach about other privacy-enhancing tools like password managers and making strong passwords with the Diceware list. We teach about GPG encryption for email. We teach about safer chatting with Jabber and OTR. Any number of things that from a basic level to a more advanced level, depending on what kind of community we're in and what kind of requests we get. And the interest has been really, really huge. We cannot keep up with the demand. And regularly, we visit a library, we'll teach a training for the librarians there, and then we'll stay and do one for the community. So the community classes, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you might be wondering a little bit why this is something that actually matters in libraries. And libraries actually have a really strong background in this. So this is a great image of something that came about in libraries. The librarians are nodding a little because they recognize this, and maybe some of the tech people do too. Right after the passage of the USA PATRIOT Act, librarians were some of the first people to really vociferously oppose this thing. We saw what kind of potential it had. Honestly, actually, we didn't. We knew it was really bad, but we didn't know it was Snowden level bad. But we knew that it was something really awful. Our legislators hadn't even read this bill. What we did know about it, it was incredibly invasive, and of course, all of those things have come to pass. So one of the provisions in the PATRIOT Act actually predates the PATRIOT Act, but was codified in that horrible piece of legislation and enforced much more, are these things called national security letters. And a national security letter is basically an information request that comes from the US federal government that is not a warrant. It's not covered by the Constitution in the way that warrants are. And it's especially insidious because it has a gag order attached to it. So you get one of these letters, and you're not allowed to tell anyone that you got it. And the gag order doesn't say, well, you're allowed to tell your lawyer. It doesn't say that. It's true, but of course it doesn't mention it. So we, in libraries, saw that there was the potential to really abuse these things, and we started to try to think really creatively of how we could oppose them. So this amazing librarian named Jessamine West came up with the idea that now is commonly referred to as a warrant canary, and she's often credited as being the first one to come up with it, which is where you say, you can't tell anyone that you got this letter, but you could probably say that you haven't got this letter. And that's why the text of it reads as such. The FBI has not been here. Watch very closely for the removal of this sign. Now, I love these because even if that library never got an NSL, if I'm a patron of that library and I see this on the wall, I'm going to ask the librarian just exactly what that is, and then I'm going to learn about this incredibly awful government overreach. So librarians have a really great history of this. It's not just this. Librarians were actually co-plaintiffs with Nick Merrill of Calyx Institute in 2005 in opposing the receipt of a national security letter. They got one about patron records, and they fought the constitutionality of the gag. And they won on a technicality, basically, that the FBI dropped the suit. So they have, in the recent history, been very strongly opposed to overbroad government intelligence and surveillance. And even before that, there were programs in the 1980s, a late Cold War program that was aimed at spying on libraries and librarians. It's called the FBI Library Awareness Program. And the Library Awareness Program came about because the FBI believed that libraries were secret KGB recruitment centers, and that librarians were secret KGB agents, and which they're totally onto us, right? So when this was discovered, this was another clandestine surveillance program, often against Americans, quite often against Russian Americans or Russian immigrants to the US. And librarians found out about this, and we were outraged and made a very public outcry against this. Even before that, we had librarians like Zoya Horn, who was indicted and sent to and jailed because of her refusal to give up information records about patrons. And so you have this really incredible rich history around privacy activism in libraries. That's not even getting into the PATRIOT Act opposition, which was probably our biggest thing, not just creating signs like this, but that the ALA came out very strongly against it. And many individual libraries opposed it as well. And one of the biggest things that we started doing in libraries was purging patron records after the PATRIOT Act was codified, because we realized that if we didn't have the information to begin with, it wouldn't be able to be subpoenaed. So why do librarians care so much about privacy? It's the relationship between intellectual freedom and privacy that really makes a lot of sense to libraries. Intellectual freedom basically is the whole reason that libraries exist, frankly. And I think librarians recognize that if you don't have privacy, you cannot have intellectual freedom. You can't read, write, and research freely if somebody is looking over your shoulder. You're going to change your behavior. We know the effect, the censoring effect that surveillance has. We've seen studies on the effect of mass surveillance on writing, for example. There was an amazing PEN America study from 2 years ago, right after the Snowden revelations, where they polled writers and said, are you going to change your behavior given what you know now about overbroad government surveillance? And every one of these writers said either maybe or yes, definitely, or I already have. And so we see the effect that it has on our intellectual heritage. We also see in libraries the relationship that surveillance has to our local communities. The people that we serve in libraries, particularly in public libraries, are often people who are members of groups who are subject to much more surveillance than the general population. So immigrants, for example, are people that use libraries much more than they represent of the general population. In the US, Muslims are a hugely surveilled group, and they have a very strong relationship to their local libraries. This is a picture of one community class that I did recently in Yonkers, New York, which is a very poor community. Again, the relationship of economic justice and surveillance. Poor people are subject to a huge amount of surveillance. I mean, they basically have to leave a data trail for every public service that they want to engage in, let alone their relationship to the police or to the FBI. These are some kids from a privacy training that I did just for teenagers. Now, anybody who is operating under the idea that teenagers don't care about their privacy, I really invite you to come to one of my privacy trainings for teens, because we have now gotten to the point where we're exceeding the capacity of library meeting rooms for them. This particular training, we got 65 teenagers to show up. Now, if you have a teenager or you've been a teenager, you probably know that teens don't go to stuff voluntarily. They don't show up for things, especially things, I mean, you know, when I was 15, if someone had said, hey, come learn about your privacy, I probably wouldn't have cared. So this, I think, is evidence of something that is changing in the public imagination around privacy, and it is certainly a post-Snowden effect. So these 65 teens showed up to this. These are just the ones who were there at the end who had so many questions that we had to hang out with them for a little while longer. And you can see they're all holding Tor Project and Library Freedom Project stickers. And these kids, I think, are really indicative of, many of them, of the relationship between surveillance and other issues of economic and social justice. So this particular community is a huge immigrant community. These kids, without even being prompted, we were talking about their threat models and the relationship of surveillance to their lives. They immediately saw that many of their parents who are immigrants are subject to these systems much more than their friends' parents who are not. I hate the term undocumented for this reason, because immigrants are some of the most documented people on the planet. You know, whether you are in the criminal justice system or something else, there is a huge data trail that is following you if you are somebody who is in the US without papers, as it were. So these kids really understand the relationship it has to their lives. They have seen the way that, unfortunately, that police violence has touched them and how police are using surveillance. They see surveillance in their communities, and it means a great deal to them personally. So librarians, I think, are unique because they get these relationships too, and because they serve these communities. They have such an embedded relationship with them. So I mentioned already that we are doing a lot of work with the Tor project. Some of the things that we're going to start doing in the future, well, that we're already doing. So this is a picture of me at CCC, which is a huge hacker conference in Hamburg. We have now some satellite operations in different countries. We've got getting started in Australia, in Germany, in Austria, France, and Mexico, and then a few other folks who are interested in getting involved. I think we've got almost all of Five Eyes covered. You know, New Zealand we're sort of still working on, and then also, you know, the next round is sort of getting NATO coverage, and then from there, you know, we can go a bit further. But there's a tremendous amount of international interest in the project. I've heard from librarians in many of those countries and from technologists, and I think that one of the most remarkable things about the project is bringing those two communities together. So we have a lot to learn from each other. It's not just that we have a really great sort of set of shared ethics. One thing that I love to hold up side by side are like free software manifestos and the ALA core values, because you're talking about very similar language. You know, these are two groups of people who care about transparency and sharing and privacy and other democratic ideals. And what we can do for each other are a number of things. So librarians are people who know a great deal about usability. They teach computer classes in their local libraries. They help people every day with using their computers. And these are people from all walks of life. I mean, I think something that librarians really recognize is that while there is absolutely a relationship between people who have lower digital literacy skills and maybe their age or economic status, what librarians I think really know is that many people don't know anything about using their computers. They know exactly what they need to know and no more than that. And so I think as a profession, we can really help technologists understand what it means for non-technical people, ordinary people, to make things more usable and secure. One thing that I think, one intersection that I think is really interesting is that the fact that so many people have lower digital literacy skills, I think, is an opportunity to introduce them to something new. So for example, I've had a lot of success in teaching libraries about switching their public PC environments to GNU Linux. And the library in New Hampshire was one of the first to set up that entire environment for his patrons. And he set it all up and he had it running for a few months, and I went back in and visited him before the before the DHS stuff happened, and I said, Chuck, how is everything going with this GNU Linux public PC environment? What have your patrons said about this? And you know what he said? He said, they haven't even noticed. And that's sort of what you want to happen, right? And the people who did notice were like, that's so cool. Most people, though, they want word processing and they want to get on the internet. You make a few tweaks, like if you have a different kind of browser that they haven't seen before, if you name it internet on the desktop shortcut, that's all they need to get there, right? So, you know, there is a lot of opportunity for introducing these kinds of tools in libraries, a lot of things that librarians can bring to the technology world. We're also really good at opening support tickets and helping with documentation and doing things of that nature. The things that the technology world can help us with include making our software better and more free. Librarians are in a really unfortunate position a lot of times where the technology that we have to use in the library is not at all in line with our values. One way that we have seen this come up over and over again is with extremely restrictive licensing. Most crypto and privacy people hate DRM. Librarians hate DRM a lot too. And if you check out an ebook from the library, you are probably going to be subject to what does RMS call it? Digital restrictions management. So we need to have better and more free systems, not just for how our materials are made available to people, but the actual software that we have to rely on for, you know, for example, checking books in and out is not at all secure. It is not free software, and it's not even good. It doesn't even work. And, you know, that is an unfortunate thing about the way that libraries are dependent on public funding. We have to take the lowest bidder. We have all these problems. If we had some technologists who are willing to help us work through them, we could get much better systems that actually respect the rights of our patrons. Beyond that, even, we are so busy in libraries that even if we believe very strongly in the benefits of things like free software, for us to go in and try to implement them ourselves when we've got story time to do, and we've got an immigration and naturalization class to teach, and we have to go and unclog the toilets in the bathroom, and do any number of other things that librarians are forced to do because of the way that our funding is being cut. We simply don't have the time to do it, let alone many of us don't have the technical skills. So I think that there's such a strong relationship that we can have together, and that is something that Library Freedom Project is really trying to build, not just in libraries on this continent, but globally, and so far we've had a huge amount of success. The next big thing that we're doing too is we're going to be creating something called Library Freedom Institute. So I told you already that sort of the big focus of our trainings is to do this sort of train the trainer thing for librarians so that they can then go and teach this in their local communities, they can implement it in their libraries. Well, we can't keep up with the demand for that, so we've got to make some clones of me and of Nima. So we're starting a 6-month intensive training for librarians. We're going to maybe have about 20 or 30 of them in there, and we're going to teach them pretty much everything that we think they need to know about their privacy rights and responsibilities, about privacy technologies, and we're going to make them do all sorts of fun things like set up a Tor relay, set up an onion service, set up Let's Encrypt on a web server, and all that great stuff. And we could definitely use some input from technologists, whether it is volunteer time or just ideas. So some other ways that you can get involved. If you are a technology person and you use a library somewhere, you can connect us to them. We have resources on our website for making the case for joining Library Freedom Project that sort of set it up with the background of these are library ethics and this is why this is something that matters here. We have a number of different privacy infrastructure type projects. I talked about the Tor node one, but one that I didn't talk about is an effort that we have to set up all libraries on HTTPS by default. It's called the Library Digital Privacy Pledge, and what we're doing is we are asking libraries to pledge to encrypt all of their web services within 6 months of signing the pledge. But what we're also offering them is some help with implementation should they need it. If folks are not familiar with Let's Encrypt, it's a really great new project that is a free, open, and automated certificate authority that is making it really easy for anybody who runs a web server to use strong encryption on it by default. The thing is, even though it's making it easier, we know that that is still kind of above some people's technical pay grade. So we have volunteer technologists who are working with us to help bring this into libraries and to solve some of the other issues, where you don't want it to break access to your database proxy server and all these things. And so we need people who know how to solve these problems. So HTTPS implementation is a huge one. The Tor node implementation stuff is super important. After New Hampshire, we have been flooded with libraries who are interested in getting involved in our Tor node project. One of the problems is that we can't go everywhere, and that even the amount of enthusiasm and interest that these libraries have, they still need somebody to sort of hold their hand along the way. So even just coming into the library and explaining to them how Tor is going to not affect their patrons' traffic, what it means for the, how much bandwidth they should donate to the project, what kind of hardware they can run it on, all these things. We're trying to meet that need, but we need so much help with it. If we want this project to be successful, it has to scale. So privacy and security audits, I realized I left a word out of that. Imagine that the word security is in there. Something that a lot of libraries have been interested in with this project is having technologists go into their library and help them kind of figure out where the holes are. So it's something that we have done, again, but we cannot meet the entire demand. We have an audience of people who so badly want to see this, to make their libraries into the most privacy protective spaces, but they don't know where to even begin sometimes. So we have basically a checklist that we're improving all the time. Different places to look, for example, are you keeping logs of any kind of patron activity, what they're doing on the computers, how to get rid of that, how to know where to look for it, how to automate these things. You know, finding other issues with your software with practices like that. And then lastly, another big goal that we have for this year is we want to, because we have so much international interest, we really need to expand our documentation to an international audience. So we need a great deal of help translating our curriculum and translating our docs. We will take any language that you got. We got Farsi covered already, and Spanish, but like those are really the only two that we're totally set on. So not just having documents that are appropriate for an international audience, but having documents that are appropriate for non-native English speakers learning in English-speaking countries. So those two things are our big, some of our big focuses for the Institute. So lastly, if you want to keep up with what we're doing, we have an announcement mailing list. It is low volume, like 1 to 2 emails a month. I promise I'm not signing you up for another crazy mailing list if you get on there, where you can see where we're going and see projects that we're working on. And I think maybe most importantly, it's a way to connect interested people from different parts of the world. You know, if we have a library that really needs help with a specific project, the announcement list is where we solicit that kind of participation from technologists. And then lastly, my contact information, I am at FlexLibris on Twitter, and then that is my GPG ID and my email address, and I will take some questions from you guys now if you have them. Thank you for your time. Wow, I never nail it at 45 minutes, and I totally did it that time, so I deserve a real round of applause for that. Usually I go way over, so. But yeah, if you guys have any questions. Yes?
So I'll start from the Canadian context.
Sure.
From the state side, how much do you know about our, since we don't know, I'll say since I know in Canada, how much are you aware of the implications for law and control and everything else from our government?
So something that I didn't mention is I just start, oh, that's right, I already broke the law. She's asking how much I know about the implications from the Canadian government around surveillance and data privacy stuff. So something that I neglected to mention was that I've just started working with the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I have a training on Friday at the University of Toronto with them, and so that's the big reason why I bring the ACLU in is that I'm not a lawyer, and sometimes I get this stuff really wrong. I know the tech stuff, and I know how to teach that sort of thing to people. I do know that you guys are not doing great. And you know, as far as the particular things that are of issue to local communities, working with the civil liberties organizations locally is so valuable, because something that's happened often with the ACLU is they'll come into a library and they'll present the kind of federal perspective and then some of the local legislation relevant to that state, because it can really vary so much depending on where you are. But then the librarians will say, here's a specific thing that happened to us. What are we supposed to do when that happens? For example, if the police come in and they say, we're looking for this person, we have to seize this computer, and it's exigent circumstances, so we don't need a warrant. So in the US, we have this concept of exigent circumstances, which the police like to misuse, which is basically where exigent circumstances are if you, again, I'm not a lawyer, so like this is not, you know, consider that when I explain this. If there is somebody who murders someone in the parking lot of the library, and then they run through the library, and then the police come running after them, and they say, which way did that guy go? And everybody points. That's an exigent circumstance. They don't need a warrant to find the guy who just ran through the library. It's an emergency. But they like to say it when they want to be a little bit more coercive about getting information. So one library brought this up recently and said there was a missing teenager. And she may have been at the library, and she often uses this one computer when she's at the library, and they wanted to take that computer. That is not an exigent circumstance. And the library had actually complied with it because they were freaked out, and because the police said, you have to give us this. And so it's really wonderful to hear from the civil liberties organizations, because they can say, actually, you're making the police do a better job by demanding the warrant requirement, and you don't have to comply, or you can say, I do not consent to this search, those sorts of things. So, you know, I'm looking forward to working more with CCLA, because what the ACLU has done is created a great set of documentation that we can just pass along to libraries. So that is something that I'll ask of them, and then if you get on our mailing list, we will put it out there and we will share it with you. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
I'm fascinated by how you get so much interest in people coming to privacy talks.
He said, I'm fascinated by how you get so much interest in people coming to privacy talks. I'm fascinated by it too. I honestly,
What are you telling people that makes them come out?
What am I telling people that makes them come out? Honestly, the promotion stuff is no different than anything else in any library. We make flyers and we send out mailing lists, things like that. And I think the low amount of promotion that we do is more evidence of how this is sort of changing for people. So for the librarians, our project is getting a pretty big profile in the library community. People know about us and they seek us out. As for their communities, because I think that's really probably what you're asking about, how we get into these libraries and get regular people from the community to show up. They just come. And I know that's maybe not the answer that you want, but something has changed, where when they see a sign that says, you know, digital privacy training, come learn about protecting your computer. In more conservative parts of the country, the language changes a little bit. I would say more to a consumer issue, like learn about protecting yourself from identity theft and fraud. In the more progressive parts of the country, we put on the flyers, protect yourself from the NSA, protect yourself from the FBI, protect yourself from Google, and people come. And what I hear often from those people in these trainings is they're really outraged, and they've been outraged, and they felt this sort of desperation around it, that they thought there was nothing they could do. And as soon as they saw this flyer advertising it, they told all their friends and ran to it. So I wish that we had some better magic formula, because, you know, I would love to be able to replicate that, but the truth is we haven't even needed to. And so I think, you know, the only variation there is maybe what kind of relationship the library already has to their community. Like, if people aren't coming to the library at all, then they're not going to see the sign. And I think, you know, maybe another thing is that as we've gotten more of a profile for the work, we've started to help really identify libraries as spaces where you can, they're identifying libraries as places where privacy education happens. And so people are now sort of looking for it and asking their librarians if they can teach this stuff. One example of this is there was a Pew study done recently about people's perceptions of libraries, I think in the US, and what sorts of services they want to see. And of the 10 or so prompts that they were given, privacy classes were the second most asked for education initiatives in libraries, after something like story time. And like, people always want story time. People always want to take their kids to that. So, you know, I think that there is something really shifting. Anybody else? Yes?
Can you describe more what exactly makes your work specific to libraries, and whether you were thinking of expanding it to universities and high schools or other institutions?
Yeah, so she asked if what makes the work specific to libraries, and if we've considered expanding it to high schools and universities and other institutions. So the first thing was that I come from a library background, and it was a world that I already knew, and one that I knew was already doing public education initiatives, and one that the public knows that they can go to libraries and get these. And that is true about any kind of library. I mean, even in academic libraries, most academic libraries offer some kind of information literacy class or something like that. So the association from you know, patrons was something that I wanted to start with. But to answer the second part of your question, we have been doing that because frankly, what I learned is that there aren't really a lot of privacy education initiatives happening, at least in the US. And so once we started to get some attention from the libraries, then we started hearing from the high schools. And once we started working with the academic libraries, then we started hearing from the professors. And so occasionally we will go in and do like a guest lecture in a class, or you know, maybe the high school it'll be sponsored by their library, so it's still kind of relevant. But more people need to do this, and I think it would be really great if somebody wanted to start a kind of parallel project and do something that was focused on one of those environments or other civil society groups. Like we hear all the time from churches and from religious-based community organizations like Muslim associations, and we try to meet the demand and we can't. It's just too many. So if somebody else wanted to do it, they can have all of our materials. It's all open source. Everything is on our GitHub page, and you can just take it and, you know, put Creative Commons licensing on it or whatever. It's yours. We're only 2 people basically. So, yes.
So it might be a bit more technical, but I'm more
It's fine. I'll see if I can handle it.
The amount of Tor exit nodes and Tor relays that are now managed or handled by libraries across the US.
Okay, so he asked how many Tor relays or exit nodes are managed by libraries. So we only had the one pilot project, and we've only completed the pilot, I should say. We're in the process of implementing them in a number of others, but it really takes a long time because, you know, typically this is how it goes. We have a bunch of very enthusiastic people at the library in the community who saw what we did in New Hampshire and say, we want to participate in this. But then we need to go in and do one of our regular privacy trainings for the library staff and for the board and for the director and sort of fill in all the gaps, because even though they say, this is really great and what you did here is really awesome and we love privacy too, but can you explain to us again how Tor works? And so they're not quite ready to take that step. What I think will happen very soon is there will be a tipping point. After we get maybe 10 or so, then I think it'll go easier. We've really tried to prioritize documentation so that other people who are maybe ready to help their communities do this can just go and do it and take our docs and take over. Were you asking about it because you're concerned with maintenance and that sort of thing?
I'm just concerned with the number of sort of NSA-controlled exit nodes
Mm-hmm.
versus the number of non-NSA-controlled.
Right.
Or in Canada, BCSE-controlled.
Right, so he said he's concerned about the number of intelligence agency controlled nodes versus non. So are you thinking that libraries present an opportunity for intelligence agency control?
No, I think there's an opportunity here to sort of wash out the bad exit nodes as
Sure.
as they are, and you know, flood them with sort of open and good ones to make it stronger.
Yeah, he's saying that it's an opportunity to flood the network with better, not bad exit nodes. Well, that's the whole idea, right? I mean, we want to present some more diversity. Ideally, the next step is some more geographic diversity, because right now there's an overrepresentation, of course, in Western Europe and in the U.S. But you know, more exit nodes are still good, even if they're in those 2 places. And we think that Tor, just like the internet, it works best if it is you know, a publicly controlled resource, right? And we know how much strength decentralization provides to the network. And so, yeah, that's the whole idea, truly. And you know, but the reason I asked if you thought it presented a problem is that some of our some people who like to comment on news articles about us think that this is actually just giving more power to the FBI, and it's like, were you not paying attention to everything I said about how libraries are resisting the FBI? Like, we're going to the right places for this. So, so yeah, I mean, that's really the goal with it. But the other goal, though, is even if we only ever open up a few Tor exit nodes in libraries, or maybe they go to bridges or non-exits, it's a great public education initiative. You know, this one node in New Hampshire taught their entire community about what Tor is, and spread to other people, you know, across the country, and we got all this global attention. And so even if that's what we get from this, I still think that the project is a success. So, anybody else?
Okay, let's thank Alison again.
Thank you, guys.